Good morning, everybody. I'm Father Oliver. I should apologise. I'm sure you'll excuse me for not wearing my Benedictine habit today because it's so hot, especially as it is today the feast of St. Benedict. And this is how I'm celebrating it. And so we'll have our opening prayer will be the prayer for the day. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Stir up in your church, O Lord, that spirit to which our Holy Father Benedict was ever faithful, so that, filled with the same spirit, we may strive to love what he loved and to practice what he taught. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. Welcome to everyone here and to those watching on the live stream. I don't know how many you are. You might be 2, you might be 200 out there. I'm afraid it's not being broadcast by Zoom or Teams and therefore can't be completely interactive. However, if you do have any questions, I'm speaking to the people on the camera out there, if you do have any questions, you could email them to the parish email address, which is easily found on our website, which you have used to access this live stream. And we will read them out, as well as those from the floor. I should add, though, for the people on the live stream, the slides being projected onto the screen will not be so easily picked up by the live stream camera, and for that I can only apologise. I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Michael Wee, who I got to know when I was guest master at Dowie Abbey. He came along to write up his doctorate, I think. I can't remember the whole title, but it involved Wittgenstein, I think. So it was way up there somewhere. But he now belongs to the Ethox Institute, an ethical body institute set up in Oxford to deal with all sorts of ethical questions. And one of the things I notice you're interested in, Michael, is, I can't remember the right title, but different moralities, basically, comparing different ways of approaching moral questions. And perhaps today we'll hear some different questions. The only thing left to say is that we switched off the lights in the main part of the church. It actually will be cooler that way. But we've kept the lights on up here. I hope you can all see, and I hope you can all hear. So I'll now hand over to Michael.
Great, thank you everyone. And thank you, Father Oliver, for packing such a crowd in this church. It's a real pleasure to be here. I was last in Stratford-upon-Avon, I was thinking about it, 8 years ago, on a day trip with my wife and our then newborn son, which kind of shocks me to think that was 8 years ago. Now we've got 3, he's not newborn anymore, just received his first Holy Communion and all that, so that's, anyway, I can't believe how much time has flown, but it's wonderful to be back here in Stratford, and for a very important occasion that all of us are gathered here to reflect together this morning on the challenges of AI. Now, I can guarantee you that I did not use AI to write this talk, although it's an open question as to whether it would have been a better talk or a worse one, but you'll be the judge of that. So, as all of you know, well, the reason for this conference is precisely the new encyclical of Pope Leo, Magnificat Humanitas, Magnificent Humanity. And just so we're literally on the same page, I want to make clear this is not the encyclical on AI, although that's the way it's often been talked about in the media, in perhaps even parish conversations. It is the encyclical on, and I quote the subtitle, Safeguarding the Human Person in the Time of Artificial Intelligence. One of these things is contingent, is temporary, the time of AI. There have been other times in the past, and there will be other times, an age of something else. In the future, maybe a new encyclical will be about that as well. The other, the human person, is perennial, at least in her dignity, her great call to holiness, to being fully alive. And so I think that's why Father Oliver has asked me to speak about dignity as the first talk of today. Not on AI, but on human dignity first. And that's also why I've entitled this talk, The Perennial Dignity of the Human Person. It's meant to introduce, in this talk, the topic of human dignity more broadly, but I will make some references to the encyclical, but I will leave most of that to Father Oliver. It will be his job after my talk. So human dignity is not the most straightforward concept. It's a concept we often like to use, we often hear being used, but it's not altogether straightforward. In my profession, philosophy, some of my colleagues don't like the term dignity because it seems a little bit woolly, pliable. People use it in all sorts of even contradictory ways. And furthermore, in an age where people are looking for certainty or perhaps for quick answers on TikTok or wherever you go for quick answers, dignity doesn't quite do it for such people, for such a search. At best, it seems to be a kind of placeholder where we are struggling to articulate something, and so we use the word dignity. When we are hurt in a profound manner, when we have been deprived of something, particularly something intangible like respect or trust, something that we feel is rightfully ours, we reach for a word like dignity to express our indignation. So it seems like a word waiting a further explanation, not a principle from which clear moral duties follow. Now, I'd like to suggest today that that is the wrong approach to thinking about dignity. As my title suggests, human dignity, our dignity, is perennial. It holds throughout the ages. But it is not, how do I put it, timeless. It is of the essence of our dignity that our understanding of it unfolds through time, through collective experience. It is a spiritual and moral reality that we, as humans, only see bit by bit. A bit like that scene we all know on Good Friday, the slow unveiling of the cross. We don't ever see the whole picture. And perhaps like the cross of Jesus, we often see dignity through failure first, where dignity is most absent, in war, in sickness, and in maltreatment. And then we are awakened as to what we can do better. So dignity, the first lesson, is that it is a continual process of discovery. It's not a kind of axiomatic principle. It's something we discover through human history and experience, particularly in bad times, but not only in bad times. So let's dive deeper, because the Church, it seems, accords quite a central role to this concept of dignity, even if it's not so straightforward. And I think what the encyclical Magnificat Humanitas makes clear, quite apart from anything specific to AI, is that human dignity is not one of many foundational concepts in the Church's social teaching. It is the foundational concept of the social teaching of the Church. And furthermore, that human dignity is most fully revealed, best understood in the person of Jesus Christ, God made man. So what does dignity mean? Some people think it refers to some kind of special status. We talk about dignitaries, we talk about the dignity of high office, and so on. And human dignity, for some people, captures this idea that it's not just a special status for the privileged few, it's a special status we all have, just by virtue of being human. But that's not very special, is it? If all of us have it, then what's so special about that status? I guess we're different from other beings in creation, that's also true. Now, the root word of dignity, however, suggests something more interesting than mere status. Dignitas, the Latin word, which comes from dignus, worthy. It's about what we are deserving, what is fitting for us. And the English word worthy also gives us another important connection missing in some other languages, which is that of worth, value. Indeed, in German, the word for dignity, Würde, has the same root as the word for worth, Wert. And that word worth, dignity, appears in the first line of the German Constitution. And it's a very powerful, hard-hitting word, worth. If we were to look in our Bibles, which we do once in a while as Catholics, you won't find the word dignity very much. Depends on your translation, of course. In the Latin, Vulgate, dignitas, or variants of it, only appears, I did count once, not with AI, but pre-AI days on the online edition. There were only 11 instances of the word dignitas, all in the Old Testament. But if we looked for those similar words, worth, worthiness, perhaps it is fitting it is the Latin-speaking Roman centurion who says to our Lord the words that we say at Mass every day, Domine non sum dignus, Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof. But he does not have the last word on human dignity. It's not all about our unworthiness, because it is Christ who says to us, look at the birds of the air, that they do not sow, nor reap, nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not worth much more than they? With or without the explicit language of dignity, this echoes sentiments found in the Old Testament. The psalmist, if you pray the office with Father Oliver, you'll know, what is man that you care for him? Mortal man, that you should keep him in mind. We seem to be worth something to God, even at times when we can hardly believe it ourselves. So dignity, as I said, is that continual process of reflection, of discovery, a discovery of what we are worth, especially in the eyes of God. So the reason why, as I said a moment ago, people reach for that word dignity, especially in moments when they feel a certain hurt or injustice, is because the word dignity represents, or it is, a cry to our fellow man, to God, which says, what am I worth to you? What am I worthy of? And that's why Magnificat Humanitas talks about the cry of the poor. And it is in the Old Testament that God says, do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless. If you do, when they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry. And so Pope Leo echoes Pope Francis's sentiment that the Church must learn to become capable of listening to the cry of the poor. So the second lesson for me about dignity, reading this encyclical, is that dignity is a cry of worth. It's more than just a philosophical or theological concept. It's a cry that all of us, I think, at different points in our lives can identify with. Now, dignity, as I've been stressing, is that process of discovery. So it has a beginning, like all processes. And that beginning is, of course, our creation, the creation of humanity in the image and likeness of God. And that whole Genesis narrative of our creation, I think, is really quite instructive of how we ought to think about dignity. It's all well and good to say, of course, that it's the image of God in us that gives us our inalienable dignity. That's the language often used in theology. But what is that dignity, that inalienable dignity in concrete terms? Now, the traditional answer in Western philosophy, at least, has been our rationality. And language has been a particularly notable sign of rationality and therefore of our dignity. Now, in some ways, I don't want to, dismiss that idea out of, completely. It's a deeply Christian idea of dignity. Jesus is the Word, as we hear in the Gospel of John. And the Greek word for word in that Gospel in the beginning was the logos. The word logos is where the word logic comes from. But it's not cold, hard logic, clinical reason, so much as a kind of creative and creating reason, a creative word. God spoke and things were made. That's how the first chapter of Genesis unfolds. Adam, the first man, spoke and animals were named. So he shares in God's creative work of reason. And it is our reasoning in turn that makes us capable of truth. It's something that we feel we are worth. We are worthy of seeking for truth. It's part of our dignity because we have reason and language. But the story of Genesis teaches us something else we would be remiss to forget, which is that in humans, our reasoning, our language, has its limits. Adam cannot find a suitable companion in the garden, nor can his language create a companion for him, however powerful our faculties of language and reasoning are. I'm going to jump the gun a little bit, but you already see perhaps how this relates to AI, which purports to create a companion, many companions for us, purely out of language. And is it not, large language models aren't the only form of AI, but they often are the most impressive form, or at least for most of us who don't use AI in professional work. LLMs are some of the most impressive forms of AI. I remember the days more than maybe 10, maybe 12 years ago when companies, you might remember, was just trialing those robotic voices when you call them. And I was trying to cancel my water bill when I was moving house. And so the robotic voice said, in a few words, what is the purpose of your call today? So I said, cancel my bill. And the voice came back, we're sorry to hear that, which was quite unnerving in those days. I don't know what to say. Oh, I'm sorry you feel that. It's sort of a robot. But nowadays, AI's ability to imitate language and even the human voice and all kinds of human expressions is really remarkable. But let's return to Adam in those pre-AI days. For me, one of the most important verses in the Bible is God saying, it is not good that man should be alone. And when Eve is created, Adam speaks what is we might consider the first love poem in history. Bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. Now this is true companionship, not pure language, but also bodily. And what is next? Why does Adam not say, I call you another man, or I call you another human? Why does God create someone so similar and yet so radically different in other ways? And the point is that and this is something I heard Pope Francis say once at a general audience, the image of God is not one man alone or two identical humans, but the image of God is man and woman together. The image of God is found, in other words, in sexual difference, in the possibility of union, despite or even because of that difference. So from the earliest days of humanity, we see what dignity, what our worth consists in. We are worthy of companionship. But as we all know from our experiences of friendship, we also have to continually learn to be worthy of companionship. It's a daily decision. Reason is important, but reason alone doesn't create companionship. And to do so, for reason to aid companionship, it must be oriented towards truth. And this has huge implications for AI. Because, as Pope Leo has said in the encyclical, truth is a common good. It's something all of us need to work towards and which serves all of us together. Because of the power of AI to amplify misinformation and confuse our search for truth, we need to work extra hard. But truth is also, he says in the same place, not simply factual. It's also deeply relational. Truth is relational, built through bonds of trust and shared practices, as well as an honest exchange with others and with the world. So the question of human dignity immediately ties these two topics together, truth and friendship. And it is through friendship that we will be best equipped to search for the truth, best equipped to use AI for the truth, rather than against the truth. It's not enough that AI has good regulation, even that's important, but for AI to serve the truth, it must also serve human relationships. And it can only do so if, like Adam and Eve, AI acknowledges and accepts the human person in all its diversity and all its unity. And it doesn't reduce humanity to mere numbers or efficiency. That's a warning of the encyclical. The technical mindset, Pope Leo suggests, comes with that pretense, like the Tower of Babel, that a single language, even a digital one, can translate everything, including the mystery of the human person, into data and performance. But the creative reason that we are given by God is not one of false unity, as we've just heard. It begins with a statement of difference. I call you woman, which is the basis. This difference is the basis of true friendship and true unity that we must become worthy of. And so we see, unlike the Tower of Babel, a different tower approaching heaven, the cross of Christ, which shows us our true dignity. The mystery of humanity in Christ becomes clear because his humanity is completely free, open to others, capable of building healthy and beautiful relationships, committed to the total gift of self. So we've talked about dignity as a continual process, dignity as a cry of worth. And the third thing to say about dignity is it is not good that man should be alone. It is not simply rational, but relational, manifested in authentic friendships. Now, beautiful as the call to total gift of self may be, the stuff you hear in wedding homilies, is it not also where we precisely fall short in this great call of total gift of self? Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, we often see dignity through our failings. And it turns out Adam and Eve knew something about that, because it didn't take humanity very long to, the fall of man and all that, the introduction of sin into the world. So let me say something about sin and punishment here, because I think the significance of God's punishment in the Garden of Eden is often overlooked, and I think has a lot to teach us about dignity and even AI. Can punishment reflect dignity? Of course it can. At least for those of us who are parents in particular, something I only understood when I became a parent 8 years ago was that, we don't stop loving our children when we punish them, but the best kind of punishment that comes from love is not going to be destructive. It's not going to be purely punitive. We punish those we love because we want to restore them. We want the punishment to be measured out, to be proportionate, to be medicinal, like a good doctor would measure out against the symptoms and give the right dosage of the right kind of medicine. And in fact, to punish somebody, to recognize their responsibility, is also a kind of recognition of that person's dignity. If we just let somebody behave wantonly, we didn't care to try and tame them, we're treating them like a wild animal, not somebody who has dignity, who can be corrected, who can be oriented towards truth and friendship. So it seems that we should understand God's punishment in the garden as a model of medicinal punishment, which then helps bring out our dignity. And what a curious medicine it is, because the man, if you remember Genesis 3:16, the man is punished to toil away in pain, and the woman is punished to pain in childbirth. We don't have to see this in a rigidly gendered way. Men also, we don't partake in childbirth, but we do partake in child rearing and all the pain and joys that come with it. Women also toil away in work. But work and childbirth are good in themselves. They were already part of human nature even before the fall. So why is the punishment pain? It's not the pain in itself that is the punishment. It's because these two things become the site, the privileged site, I even want to say, where we learn to show love to others, where we relearn the hard way what our dignity consists in. And that is why you see this in the church's social doctrine. The dignity of work and the dignity of family life have indeed become important pillars, twin pillars of human dignity in the church's eyes. They are both equally interesting examples also of dignity that the church has taken, admittedly, centuries to recognize and acknowledge. Prior to the early modern period, work, at least for the common man, not for nobles perhaps, not for knights and all those, but work for the common people was not seen as something particularly noble or ennobling. It was a fact of life, boring drudgery, an instrument to make a living, to keep your family fed. But the Industrial Revolution changed that. It brought about huge changes in the way labour and capital were arranged in society. On the one hand, opportunities for work in the new industrial economy represented a grave new threat, which the last Pope Leo XIII spoke about, new possibilities of exploitation that had never existed before. But with work also came new possibilities of self-reliance, of independence, of individual growth, and of new kinds of social relations, unions, working men's clubs. So the dignity of work, which this new encyclical also emphasizes, was born in a crisis, an inflection point in human history. Not to say it was completely new. And today we celebrate, as we just heard, the feast of St. Benedict, to whom Magnificat Humanitas points as the father of this idea of the dignity of work. It was St. Benedict who wrote in his Rule for Monks that he is a true monk who lives by the work of his hands. And if I'm not wrong, St. Benedict was also the first to popularize the term Opus Dei, literally the work of God, to refer to the prayer of the divine office. Ora et labora, prayer and work, is one of the mottos of Benedictine life. So it's quite fitting that the founder of the new Opus Dei, some of you may know, St. Josemaria, who was he who stressed the goodness of daily work as a means for all of us to become holy. He stressed to his followers that work was a command of God even before the fall. It is originally good. And so today, Magnificat Humanitas reminds us that created in the image of God, our own work in some ways continues God's work, for we thereby contribute to the progress of society and the common good. We put to good use the capabilities we have received. We improve and beautify the world. We support our families engaged in cooperative relationships. Through listening and dialogue, you hear the relational part of dignity coming out. Now, this is not easy, and the punishment of Adam continues to afflict us. But by dedicating ourselves to the struggle of daily work, we use work to build up a better world, and the pain of toiling away becomes the measure of our love, of our dignity. Now, what of childbirth, a subject I don't know firsthand, but which I've witnessed a couple of times now? One of the great teachings of Rerum Novarum, the first social encyclical by Pope Leo XIII, is that he rejected the idea that the state comes before the family. Leo XIII taught that the family has its own authority and autonomy, which the state cannot trespass on. And this relates to the Garden of Eden. Humanity started not as a political idea, but as a family, a married couple who had children. So the dignity of marriage and the family as a means of our sanctification, of becoming holy, is now indisputable in the Church, which historically, as we all know, had favored celibacy and the priesthood as the higher vocation. Again, is not totally new. St. Augustine was pioneering. Most of his contemporaries first wrote a treatise on celibacy, on virginity, and maybe then on marriage. Augustine first wrote on the good of marriage, and then on celibacy. So just as work continues God's creative work in making the world better, even more so does marriage and procreation, with new life being brought into the world. We literally participate in God's creative work, bringing a whole new human person into being. And it was the Swiss theologian von Balthasar who once said something beautiful, that with every child who comes into this world, he or she receives an invisible gift of grace from the mother. From her 9 months of carrying the child, often through some amount of pain and difficulty, that becomes a kind of intercession on behalf of the child, a gift of grace that the child inherits at birth. So the punishment of Adam and Eve is a signal of their future dignity to be regained. We are, in fact, worthy of cooperating in God's creative work, worthy of participating in God's work through marriage and family life and through our professional or other kinds of work. But we mustn't forget the greatest dignity promised. For in the punishment of the serpent, God makes the first ever promise of the Redeemer, what biblical scholars call the proto-evangelion, the first gospel. God says, "I shall put enmity between you, the serpent, and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." Genesis 3, I think 17, the first promise of the Redeemer. A most wonderful verse which we often hear at carol services in this country. That is our greatest dignity, that we are worthy of a Redeemer who will indeed accomplish our salvation through taking on our punishment. So God's punishment mysteriously shows us the grandeur, the great dignity that we are in fact capable of. Work and family, my fourth lesson, are twin pillars of human dignity in the world, which affect all of us. For none of us is without either of these two things. That's the fourth thing about dignity. Now, in my last section, I come to perhaps one of our favorite topics as Catholics, which is sin. As you can see, we've barely left the first 3 chapters of Genesis, and we can already see more than a sketch of the foundations of human dignity and its implications, including for AI. But sin is precisely those moments where dignity is lacking, where we then precisely perceive what we need to do to regain and improve our dignity. Now, sin, unfortunately, is also a word that gets a little bit distorted in the Catholic imagination. It's incredibly difficult to have a balanced view of the relative seriousness of different sins. I don't know if any of you heard recently Pope Leo saying something on a flight, I think in an interview, that the unity of the Church, he said, doesn't revolve merely on sexual sin. It's often the case that people have a slightly or somewhat exaggerated view of the seriousness of sexual sin, and conversely are less sensitive to other forms of very grave sin. How do we correct that? Now, we all know the 10 Commandments, I hope, but I want to present to you a shorter list, a different list, which has deep roots in Catholic moral theology, but we don't hear about it so much. But it's 4 rather than 10, so hopefully we'll all remember it after today. It's a list of sins that theologians call the sins that cry out to heaven for vengeance, because they're just 4 mentioned in the Bible with similar sorts of language about crying out to God and God hearing it. We, in fact, already heard one earlier on. And the first one is murder, from the story of the murder of Abel by Cain. The second one is sexual immorality, Sodom and Gomorrah, is where it comes from. The third one, from St. James, is not paying a worker his fair wages, defrauding the worker. That is also a sin that cries out to heaven for vengeance. And the last one, which we heard just now from Exodus, is the oppression of the poor. I find this quite a handy checklist, if you like, because these 4, 3 from the Old Testament, 1 from the New, pretty much sums up Judeo-Christian ethics. These are the things we care most deeply about in the world, in how the affairs of human life should be ordered. They're all about how we relate to one another, which is a cornerstone of dignity. And these are grave sins because they go against the cry of dignity, the cry of worth. What is worthy behavior of us, given our great dignity? So it's no surprise that all 4, you can tick off this checklist when you read the encyclical, make an appearance in some form in the encyclical. And I think it's key to understanding what the Holy Father is doing, because it spends a lot of time in the encyclical talking about dignity before talking about AI itself. Human dignity is perennial, and the most serious sins that make our failure to live up to that dignity take the same general form throughout the ages. But the specific forms, the specific challenges take on new guises. Let's take murder, the first sin. Pope Leo draws attention to the logic of war that dominates politics as just another political solution rather than a genuine last resort. And then he talks about the ability of AI-assisted technologies to take over the calculations and the executions of war, which is deeply dangerous, not just because of miscalculations, which we've seen happen, but also because it removes human responsibility from violence. In relation to sexual immorality, the encyclical mentions the sinister capabilities of AI in manipulating and spreading pornographic images. In relation to defrauding the worker, AI takes things to a new level of potentially replacing the worker completely, thus creating an economy that doesn't truly serve the common good. But of the four sins, for me the most striking one is the oppression of the poor, because that sin is not just on an individual level. It makes us think of what John Paul II famously called the structures of sin that create and perpetuate oppression, which we might knowingly or unknowingly participate in. And so it takes us back to that cry, that question of what am I worth to you? What am I worthy of? Does AI help to build a society which emphasizes and values the intrinsic worth of human beings, of authentic loving relationships and cooperation? Or does it build a society that judges people purely based on economic productivity and efficiency? And I won't read the whole quote out, but particularly important to the Holy Father is the fact that in this AI revolution, it isn't just states who wield this power, either of tremendous good or of oppression. It's potentially a small group of people, technological actors, who set conditions for access, in whom power is concentrated, and they can evade public oversight and distort the forms of development that AI brings about. So we see then that with the lens of human dignity, far from being a woolly or pliable concept, we are actually led to consideration of some of the most profound elements of human life. The thing about these four sins that cry out to heaven for vengeance is that they all present us with a stark choice about how to build up society. Are we building Jerusalem? This is Pope Francis at the Wailing Wall. Or are we building Babel, which Pope Leo asks us to make that choice in the encyclical? The city of love, the city of God, or the opposite? Now, with murder, with human life, we know that when AI is used properly, it can revolutionize scientific and medical discoveries. With sexual morality, AI can actually be used to scan content online for illegal and immoral content and pictures, much more efficiently than human censors, thus safeguarding the internet better than we could. With workers, now it's a more complex issue, but AI can make businesses more efficient to aid but not replace workers. So all of these things require the right choices to be made so that the overall result is not oppression, but a magnification of our magnificent humanity. Doing all of that shows new sides of our dignity, our creativity in solving problems, our relentless search for bettering the life of others. And so I'll leave you with the words of the encyclical. The primary choice, therefore, is not between a yes or no to technology, but rather between constructing Babel or rebuilding Jerusalem, between a power that claims to dominate the heavens and the people who work together in the presence of God to rebuild the walls of fraternal coexistence. Let's try to learn dignity not through punishment and failure, but through our ability to do good things. Thank you very much.
Yes, if you're happy to answer questions. I slipped it in on the menu, so I hope you're... could I have someone with the surname of Bailey to take round the microphone? Where are they? Thank you, Liv. So if you put up your hand if you have a question, and Liv will come to give you the microphone so that we can all hear and so that the people on the live stream can hear as well.
What AI products or software do you use, or have you used?
Right, I can tell you the first time I used ChatGPT in my life was when I was setting some philosophy exam questions in Durham, where I used to teach when I was doing my PhD. And I was so curious about ChatGPT, I was resisting using it, but I decided to put in my exam questions, 2 of the questions I set, and asked ChatGPT to write a 1,000-word essay on those exam questions. And I have to say, I was impressed at what it produced, but immediately with my exam markers hat on, I thought, I wouldn't give this a first. It's a good 2-1, but not a first. And that, I think, consistently, I mean, this was about, I want to say 4 years ago, and things change very rapidly in the field, but speaking to other academics who are trying to detect AI essays and that sort of thing, that's remained consistent. AI produces good academic work, but not anything particularly inventive or creative. And I was just thinking about this last night, that when you look at the mistakes that AI makes, they are often mistakes that no human would actually make. And so it's interesting that they kind of occupy this middle ground quite well. But they make mistakes that no human would make, and they also don't really do the really good creative work that humans would make. So that's a lesson I've learned from using. So I use AI occasionally just to, spruce up.
Next person, someone? That's Henry.
I got one question, but first of all, I'd like to just really appreciate, especially the last slide. I'm a heavy user of AI because of my different roles, but I'm also in a very fortunate position to shape the future. I'm certainly finding it very, very worrying. It's gone too fast without government intervention, without regulatory control, and I'm not seeing it likely to be happening in the future because, a bit like climate change, it crosses international boundaries. I suspect you are very aware of that. So I think your last slide, especially your shortfall list, exceptionally helpful. It clarified my thoughts, how I'm able to contribute in my way, actually focusing on the last slide about it's highly divisive, highly useful for the people who are making use of it and becoming smarter and cleverer. And I have somebody running 116 agents, the question which I'm going to about to ask. And at the expense of human productivity, you gain so much, but have you thought about what are you going to do with your time, with your relationship? And you have deprived so many people with their jobs. So I'm very grateful for the last slide. So my question is that, my understanding is that AI so far is very good at complicated matters, but on the complex matters like human, moral issue, relationship. So my understanding is that we are only 10 years away from the other side of the brain, the bit which they are trying to improve. Is that your understanding? The complicated matters, they have overall control. They are not worried about it. They are more worried about the human aspect, the moral aspects. Agent, what is a good outcome? And that's the bit which I'm very, very concerned about.
Yeah, I can't speak too much to the technical prowess and predictions of that in AI. What I would say from my understanding is that the interesting thing about AI, well, speaking about large language models in particular, is that they have, brief initial moments of brilliance, but over time they get stupider because they're fed. They're kind of not exactly a closed box, but they're fed on themselves. They're trained on themselves, and so they become quite self-referential. And so they always need new inputs to come in. So some of these tech companies are scanning the internet, taking books before their copyright's free and that sort of thing. Maybe even my thesis, I don't know. These things are being fed into AI to keep it continually updated, because otherwise it just closes in on itself and becomes more and more it actually goes off the rails. So one of the big challenges for AI developers is to make that kind of learning, machine learning, more efficient, more automatic, if you like. But that also gives us a sense of AI is only as good as what is fed into it. And who is writing that content that's being fed into it? It's still us. It's still humans. It could be your blog posts. It could be, I don't know, things people write in the newspapers. So we do actually know it, whether we know it or not, we are shaping the capabilities of AI in our own way.
Thank you for the question so far. Could I suggest, though, that there will be an opportunity with the panel particularly to ask more general questions about the applications of AI? Could we try now to question Michael more on the question of dignity and the human person, particularly if there's anyone here who would disagree with him about how we define a human person. So if your questions are on those lines, fine. Yeah, over there.
Thank you. My question, coming back to your final slide, etc., was who gets to decide how we use AI, what is appropriate to use AI for, and what still has to be a human decision? We've talked about the technocrats rather driving this process towards efficiency, possibly to the exclusion of the human element. STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths, seem to like AI rather a lot because it's good for sorting data. The humanities seem to be playing catch-up in terms of the actual effects it may have on society. And the question is, as was alluded to before, where's the regulation? Is it political decisions about how AI is used? Or do we leave those decisions simply to the technocrats? Or dare I say, for shorthand, surveillance capitalism and digital feudalism in terms of the very big players who stand to make money out of things and control the access to it? I'm sorry, that was three questions in one, but the main thing is about how we, the ordinary people, actually gain some control over this thing before it runs away and creates a dystopia.
Yeah, I think the short answer to that is the tenor of the document suggests it shouldn't be big tech players, at least not on their own, but it should be a genuinely democratic decision. I think at the local or national level, we still have avenues for that. We need to participate in whether they're citizens' assemblies, government consultations, writing to your MPs. I think the challenge is more difficult, as you say, because it crosses borders. So I think the challenge for all of us, I don't have an answer to this, is how AI regulation decisions can be genuinely democratic, even as they cross borders. And so I think it's really about getting the right research and the right perspectives out in the public square, so that those who are in power will listen to that. But that's only the briefest of answers.
Okay. Sorry, I already got the microphone. Got it.
Oh, you got it.
Sorry. A quick question that very simple and straightforward. Why do you think, it's very much linked to your field, why do they build, I'm very intrigued, human-looking, like AI built into robots that are very much looking nowadays like the most modern, the newest ones look like human? Why do they make such a vague boundaries between machine and human, and what are the implications ethically and in regard to dignity?
Yeah, that's a great question. To me, it depends on the context, but I largely prefer robots that don't look like anything organic. I think humanoid robots are one thing. I don't know if you've seen robotic dogs that were used to, for example, do kind of disperse crowds during COVID and that sort of thing, which even had a robotic bark, mind you. Now, there's a couple of things to say on that. I think the first thing is that with any field of human creativity, art, robotics, it's fair to say that the natural world still has a huge hold on our imagination, which speaks to the importance of actually, yes, it could be slightly sinister that robots look like dogs and trees and humans, but it's a kind of backhanded compliment to what we need most. But also, I think this comes down to a choice of values. People, I think genuinely, some people at least build robots, AI machines, to look like humans and dogs because they genuinely buy into this whole ideology that these things can and will replace. So they are as good as organic. And I think if that is the motivation, that is pretty dangerous. And we've seen already different kinds of forms of that. I mean, AI companions who are pretty much humanoid. I think that's really we've gone beyond the thin end of the wedge with those things. As opposed to, I don't know, robotic waiters that look a bit more like a Dalek. I'm okay with those, you know.
I think the church and humanist legislators have something in common, and that's a difficulty of being potentially left with statements that are wish lists. How can, I mean, because what I mean by that is we all want dignity for the human person. Every single person here wants it, and most people in the world want it as well. Mm-hmm. How can we make progress into the middle ground of understanding how AIs actually work so that legislators, for example, can legislate in terms that are meaningful to the people who actually build AIs?
Yeah, I think people, the approach that some people take in politics is to ban first and worry later. I mean, I know with the social media ban for under 16s, that's really been quite divisive amongst people I know. Some people are very much, it's about time we ban Instagram for our kids. I'm not sure if that's just a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction on the part of the government. I don't have a fixed view on this. I think sometimes it's necessary to ban first and study over time. But ultimately, the ban is not going to replace the need for study and the fact that people will still find all kinds of ways to access social media and other content even with a ban in place. And so the only way forward really, as I see it, at least as an indispensable element, is to have genuinely consultative structures to figure out exactly how young people, for example, who are often talked about in AI circles but not actually asked, not actually spoken to, there need to be more forms of participatory research to let 15, 16-year-olds actually share their views on what it is like for them to use AI, to grow up in an AI world, and so on. And I think if we listen to the wisdom of the young, which Father Oliver will tell you is a very Benedictine idea, you often listen to the youngest monk, that's in the rule of St. Benedict, I think that's something to hold on to listen to those people who are growing up in a world where they never knew a world without AI. However young they may be, I think their perspectives are very valuable for policymakers.
We will have an opportunity to hear from our two representative people that they know they are representative of their generation, and a couple more back there as well. It's coming.
Thank you very much. The Article 1 of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights says, all human beings are born equal in dignity and rights. Is the Church, are you saying anything different or additional? What's the Church saying that's additional to what's the founding document of the UN?
So I think, well, as you may already know, one of the authors of that document was the Catholic theologian Jacques Maritain, the French Thomist, who was very instrumental in bringing together thinkers from different traditions, including a Confucian scholar, I don't remember the rest, a group of half a dozen or more, to work on that Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But the devil is in the details. So I think at a high level, so to speak, the Church would agree 100% with the idea that we are all born equal in dignity and rights. But how we understand the expression of dignity, or the expression of laws that should recognize that equal dignity and rights, I think we will be aligned sometimes with the world, for example, on better working conditions and workers' rights. And sometimes we won't be aligned with the world, particularly in relation to beginning of life and end of life ethics.
Somebody was mentioning democratic principles, but of course you've got politicians, relatively few politicians dealing with this, with the major companies. So how does the theology and the Church cope with the idea of momentum, hype, and fear of missing out amongst politicians on GDP growth, etc.?
I think what the Church tends to offer to politicians is a space quite apart from what they're used to reflect on these issues in a way that is, set apart from GDP and productivity. And the Church, in fairness, can be quite effective at this. We don't necessarily see it. A lot of it takes place behind the scenes. But the Church, unique among world religions, has a very special convening power. I remember speaking to the former British ambassador to the Holy See, Sally Axworthy, who said to a group of us in Durham that one of the most unique things about diplomacy in the Holy See is that it is the only diplomatic space she knows of where the primary lens of policy and diplomacy considerations is ethics, not power, not productivity. So politicians go off to Davos, they go off to all kinds of other places, Ankara recently, but they also go off to Rome. And those conversations are quite different. And the more people go there, I think it was the CEO of Anthropic who participated in Pope Leo's launch of the encyclical, and he said very plainly, it might be a bit odd for somebody like me to be speaking here, but I am genuinely thankful to be received here with fraternity and to participate in this dialogue. So the more people also go to Rome rather than Davos, the more fear of missing out there might be amongst others.
I'll try and keep to the timetable, which means that we move on now. There will be an opportunity to ask Michael further questions when we come. Will be part of the panel, the last part of the morning. If you just talk among yourselves while I and Michael sort out the next lot of slides. Talk among yourselves, come up with other questions. If you'd like to take your seats again. Sorry to press you. Okay, can we start again, please? First, I should say I'm very grateful to Michael for starting us off. I thought that the human dignity is the dignity of the human person is so important in the encyclical that I thought to have someone speaking about that first and separately was a very good way of starting. So I will not be saying so much about that, but please take everything that Michael has said as a preface to, does that sound right, a preface to what I'm saying? Or include it in your assessment of what I'm going to say. I was wondering about, asking what you understand by artificial intelligence and how it affects you. But we are going to run out of time if we're not careful. But just if someone's got one sentence, is someone able just to shout out, just so we haven't got to worry about the microphone, one sentence definition of AI? How about the president of the AA Society? Huh? Stupid. Okay, that's one reaction. Yes?
AI gives you knowledge, but
right.
Humans have wisdom.
Thank you. Hang on, we're going beyond one sentence. Sorry. So it's useful information, but not wisdom. I just wanted to have a couple. You'll have more opportunities later on for all your other sentences. Yes, right. So I'm going to show you this thing. This is a friend of mine at the Grand Canyon who was pretending to let his friends throw him over the edge. And then, thank you, Michael, it happened. That was just generated from that photo. So that's what AI can do. Now, you've probably all seen this. Trying to identify yourself as not a robot, but a human, counting the traffic lights. It's probably a very good way of authenticating yourself. But did you know that someone somewhere, or some AI bot somewhere, is tracking your definition of the traffic lights and feeding it into the data provided to driverless cars? So driverless cars on the other side of the world are getting better because of your ability to spot the traffic lights. Did you know you were using AI? Yes, you are, quite a lot. This is from my Amazon page, picking up where I left off. This is probably pretty straightforward, just finding out what I have bought in the past, and then, of course, suggesting what I might buy in the future. I presume that's AI is working there. This I don't understand. This is the World Cup. This is some sort of analysis of what happens after a match. I presume that you don't have little people scribbling on notepads, working out the percentages of possession and things. I just assume that it's being done by AI. You don't need to look at any of the detail, but you can get this sort of thing, sorting a lot of data. And now this is where all this started. Can you press again? I gave a sermon on AI. I asked another program to clone my voice and then use that artificial device to read the artificial sermon. Here are the first few sentences.
Beloved in Christ, among all the apostles, there is one whose name has become an adjective. We do not say a Peter or a John, but we say, even today, a doubting Thomas. And yet, if we listen carefully to the gospel, we may discover that Thomas is not the apostle of doubt. He is the apostle of honest faith.
So that happened on the second Sunday of Easter. The audience, the congregation were rather shocked, and that gave rise to an almost spontaneous meeting the following Saturday, where 25 people came to talk about AI, and that was the genesis of this meeting today. At the end of it, I said I hadn't found that was based on me speaking into my laptop for 30 seconds, a text of my own choosing, and then 11 Lab, which is an AI firm which does this, coming back immediately with another text of its choosing, as it were, if bots can choose, with that sermon which ChatGPT had written. It was okay. I said it sounded rather dull, and there was laughter in the church. So I asked, they had to judge whether all my sermons were that dull. So let's go on to the subject of today. So AI is all around us. I asked another program. Sorry, no, we don't. Pope Leo XIII, we've already heard about, Rerum Novarum, in 1891. Pope Leo XIV signed this document today, Magnificat Humanitas, exactly 135 years after this, on the 15th of May, the same date. And of course, when he chose the name Leo, because all popes choose a new name when they first are elected, he said explicitly that he was consciously following his distinguished predecessor, and everybody assumed that he meant that there were things like this that Pope Leo produced, which he was thinking of. Pope Leo XIII was extremely strong in what he said about the dignity of the worker, as we already heard, trade unions, the relationship between capital and labour. He used very strong language, which was criticised and condemned by both capitalists and socialists. So that's probably a good balance. He must have been onto something by saying the two extremes disagreed with. I'm going to be using quite a lot of text in this, so this one is quite long, but it's very strong. The ancient working men's guilds were abolished in the last century, and no other protective organisation took their place. Hence, by degrees, it has come to pass that working men have been surrendered, isolated and helpless to the hard-heartedness of employers and the greed of unchecked competition. To this must be added that the hiring of labour and the conduct of trade are concentrated in the hands of comparatively few, so that a small number of very rich men have been able to lay upon the teeming masses of the labouring poor a yoke little better than that of slavery itself. Can you imagine if you're one of the very few rich men at the time? You'd be pretty horrified by that. And it had a big impact. Pope Leo was thinking very much about industrialization, and some people have said that Pope Leo XIV is addressing, the fourth industrial revolution, as it were. So here you have a picture about the same time as the encyclical, 1895, a weaver's cottage, a weaver in the back, and a child, perhaps, with a spinning wheel in the front. 1897, please start. This is a modern film of a reproduction of an 1897 spinning mule. So one girl sitting by herself next to her father on the loom, spinning one bobbin at a time, presumably. And this machine basically takes over. I think it illustrates the sort of things that Leo was addressing, where the worker has just lost his, to use a word, dignity. Okay, thank you. Parishioners may know that I'm quite keen on weaving, so it's no accident that I've chosen this, including this picture. This is a jacquard loom, and these punched holes, I'm not sure the date, but I think it's 19th century. They're an early form of computer control of a machine, effectively, either ones or zeros, or holes or not holes. And so it's interesting that weaving was also a place where early type of computing technology was used to industrialize, to mechanize what was formerly a handcraft. Michael's already read out the subtitle, but I think it's worth looking at again, on safeguarding the human person in the time of artificial intelligence. Firstly, I must say it's an enormous document, and we certainly don't have time to cover every aspect of it. In fact, I'll have to leave some parts of it completely aside. I hope that what you will hear will encourage you to read the document yourselves. That's the result we want. Everyone goes out and reads it. I did have some copies which a kind parishioner brought to us. If anybody has them and would like to give them back so they can be shared around other people, fine. Of course, it's easily available online. I should add that some of the aspects of the document which I don't deal with myself may well arise in the panel discussion where we have someone representing education, medicine and, very broadly, business. So the main principles. We've heard a lot about the dignity of the human person. Michael recalled the scriptural background, referred to St. Augustine and the whole tradition. So that fundamental doctrine and its implication for our morality is right at the centre of this whole body of work called Catholic social teaching, which goes back to, as we've seen, to Rerum Novarum and to all the popes since Pius XI. I could give any numbers of quotations from Magnificat Humanitas to show how much it is embedded in Catholic social teaching. Here's a list of the various encyclicals published by the popes over the last century. The ones in red are those which specifically refer to Rerum Novarum. It really was an important document. So the first one, after 40 years, after Rerum Novarum, Octogesima, after 80 years, and St. John Paul II, the 100th year. So all referring back to this 1891 document, which is quite an extraordinary thing, but does demonstrate the sort of seamless thread of material going all the way back. Mater and Magister, the second one, by John the 23rd, 1961, so 70 years. Here's a quotation from that, which again underlines the importance of Pope Leo XIII. Seldom have the words of a pontiff met with such universal acclaim. In the weight and scope of his arguments, and in the forcefulness of their expression, Pope Leo XIII can have but few rivals. Beyond any shadow of doubt, his directives and appeals have established for themselves a position of such high importance that they will never surely sink into oblivion. They opened out new horizons for the activity of the Universal Church and the Supreme Shepherd by giving expression to the hardships and sufferings and aspirations of the lowly and oppressed, made himself the champion and restorer of their rights. As Michael said, the cry of the poor. So all of these are referenced by Pope Leo XIV in this document, and many other documents from the Vatican and its various departments, including one published just quite recently, January 2025, one of the last things approved by Pope Francis, Antiqua et Vetera, Old Things and New, with the subtitle, On the Relationship Between Artificial Intelligence and Human Intelligence. Again, it's not possible to go into it in detail, but its opening words are very relevant to our subject and what we've already said about the continuity of the Church's approach to social teaching and AI. So, Antiqua et Nova, I made a mistake there, begins like this. With wisdom both ancient and new, we are called to reflect on the current challenges and opportunities posed by scientific and technological advancements. I would submit that Magnificat Humanitas certainly contains wisdom both ancient and new, picking up what you were saying about AI giving us facts, information, but not wisdom. So the fundamental foundational teaching of all these documents is the same, but now it's applied to new circumstances, and AI is certainly new. Rerum Novarum literally means of new things. The first sentence of that encyclical was that the spirit of revolutionary change, which has long been disturbing the nations of the world, should have passed beyond the sphere of politics and made its influence felt in the cognate sphere of practical economics is not surprising. Although the Catholic Church tends to think in centuries, there has always been an awareness of the needs and concerns of the contemporary world. as Leo XIII said, the new things. The Second Vatican Council, which began on the 12th of October 1962, and then just 4 days later, the Cuban Missile Crisis erupted and brought the world very close to nuclear annihilation. Just 6 months later, John the 23rd published Pacem in Terris, Peace on Earth, and its political context included the erection of the Berlin Wall and the ongoing war in Vietnam. Over the years, politicians have argued that the Church should keep out of politics, and let us be no doubt, AI is deeply political. Leo is just the most recent of the popes to ignore that warning, and he seems to have got away with it. At the beginning of the encyclical, the Holy Father presents two striking biblical images. One we've already seen, the Tower of Babel, and this is the text that goes with it. The people decided to build a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. Fearing being scattered across the earth, they sought to guarantee stability and power for themselves, and above all, to make a name for themselves. It was an impressive feat. A single language, a single technology, a single direction. However, the project concealed a profound danger. It was a project conceived without reference to God, supported by a uniformity that eliminated diversity and that chose homogenization over communion. When a city is built on pride and the claim to self-sufficiency, communication breaks down. Languages are confused, and people no longer understand each other. The result is not unity, but dispersion. Babel thus reveals the limits of any effort that, however grandiose, arises from self-affirmation, sacrifices human dignity for efficiency, and aspires to reach heaven without God's blessing. And then this other image is from Nehemiah. Nehemiah, there's a text to go with this as well. Nehemiah comes back from the exile in Babylon and sees the ruin of the city and seeks to rebuild it. And Leo contrasts the Tower of Babel being created and the rebuilding of God's city in Jerusalem. Nehemiah then asked the king for permission to return to Jerusalem, and upon arriving, examined the destroyed areas in silence. He did not impose solutions from above. He convened the families, assigned each of them a section of the wall to rebuild, listened to their concerns, coordinated their efforts, and addressed any opposition. The narrative shows how the city is reborn not through the initiative of one man, but through the shared responsibility of all. Men, women, priests, artisans, heads of households, and young people all play a part. It is an undertaking with God at the center, which rebuilds relationships before rebuilding with stones. Again, the dignity of the human person being not just rational, but relational. Thus, ancient Jerusalem rediscovers a common language, not one of uniformity, but one of communion, namely the harmony that arises when all persons assume their own role and recognize that their strength comes from the Lord. After these preliminary pointers, the Pope goes on to trace the Catholic social teaching, which we've already heard a great deal. This train of thought can be seen in the chapter headings, which I will not be dealing with in detail. Sorry, I've missed one. There it is. So those are the chapters which we're not looking at. So quite a lot. There are 5 chapters. We're not really looking at 2, 3, and 4, just because there's so much. Okay, and some of it's been covered. So this is near the end of that section about building. You see that I've put in bold the word building. This is numbers 11 to 16, so still quite early on in the encyclical. Building a city founded on the common good implies, first and foremost, building on a firm relationship with God. Secondly, building for the common good means accepting the limits and weakness of humanity without considering them an error to be corrected. Thirdly, building a world in which everyone can flourish requires shared responsibility and courage. Finally, building for the common good requires an evangelical language. We must avoid humiliating or antagonistic works opting rather for a clarity that sheds light and a frankness that unlocks new possibilities. In the era of artificial intelligence, when human dignity is threatened by new forms of dehumanization, ours is the pressing duty to remain profoundly human. With the heart of a shepherd and a father, I ask everyone to abandon the construction of yet another Tower of Babel and to join forces in building up the common good so that humanity will never lose its beauty and the world once again will come to recognize the human heart as the place where God desires to dwell. I referred earlier to the Pope seems to have got away with interfering in politics. Why should this be? Why are people listening? Well, in the first place, Pope Leo is very well informed. What is particularly interesting this time is that secular commentators have been so impressed by the encyclical and by the Pope's independence and what perhaps they think is his originality, although as we've seen, much of that is very much within the tradition, and by his status as a moral leader, in massive contrast to so many leading figures in our deeply disappointing world. Now, this has certainly not always been true of other popes. For instance, St. Paul VI's encyclical Humanae Vitae on artificial birth control in 1968 was completely against the mores of the time, the swinging 60s and all that. And more recently, secular commentators did not give Benedict XVI a very sympathetic hearing, but then not every Roman Catholic did either. So the sections of the encyclical which deal with the specific nature of AI seem to be very carefully written. Pope Leo cannot be accused of being naive or ignorant. Secondly, there is sufficient concern among many people of different faiths or of none that AI is potentially very dangerous, and Pope Leo addresses many of these concerns. There are stories of the masters of the world, otherwise known as the tech bros, being booed by university students in America seriously concerned about their future and the future of the planet. There are stories of AI companies hiring philosophers to tackle the moral issues which they cannot ignore or brush aside. Have you been headhunted yet, Michael? No, okay. Is the whole thing going to be a financial catastrophe, which will burst like the dot-com bubble of the late 1990s? The billions, no, trillions of dollars tied up in these enterprises are truly mind-blowing. So maybe Leo has caught the mood, the zeitgeist. Thirdly, these are all reasons why Pope Leo seems to have got away with saying something so out there. The encyclical is beautifully written, far more so than some of the documents which come out of Rome. I need to be careful about what I say. We are being live-streamed and indeed recorded, but I think it is generally recognized that there is a language called Vaticanese, which is not always clear and concise. Fourthly, the Pope is very outspoken at times and does not soften his words. He has a very powerful passage which was taken up by the media on the lookout, as they always are, for the original and catchy phrase. In this case, disarming AI. No, that's wrong. I don't think I read the one out. Sorry, you have. Thank you. I would like to employ the expression to disarm, which is close to my heart. Disarming AI means freeing it from the mentality of armed competition, which today is not limited simply to the military context, but is also an economic and cognitive phenomenon. This entails a race for ever more powerful algorithms and larger data sets, driven by the desire to secure geopolitical or commercial dominance. To disarm means discrediting the assumption that technical power automatically confers the right to govern. To disarm does not mean rejecting technology, but preventing it from dominating humanity. It means freeing technology from monopolistic control, opening it up to discussion and debate, therefore making it human-friendly and restoring it to the plurality of human cultures and ways of life. Our task today is not only ethical or technical, it is ecological in the deepest sense. for it concerns a new dimension of our common home. AI is already an environment in which we are immersed, as well as a force with which we must engage. For this reason, merely regulating it is insufficient. It must be disarmed, welcoming and accessible. It is noteworthy that the Pope, after this passage, Pope Leo uses particularly strong language in a section headed Breaking the Chains of New Forms of Slavery. I'm sorry, I've got some of these the wrong way around. It should be, no, it wasn't the right position, sorry. Yes. So this is under a heading, Breaking the Chains of New Forms of Slavery. And again, it's very powerful. This distorted view of the human person is reflected today in various forms of servitude directly linked to the digital economy. Nothing in the world of AI is immaterial or magical. Every seemingly immediate and flawless response is the result of a long chain of mediation involving vast networks of natural resources, energy infrastructure, and above all, people. A significant part of the digital economy's functioning relies on the silent work of millions of people engaged in essential yet largely unseen activities such as data labeling, model training, and content moderation, often involving disturbing material, as Michael referred to. This could be a bonus, but the people are doing it. It's another case. In many cases, these workers are young people, predominantly women, working under demanding conditions for minimal wages. Added to this invisible labour is the even harsher work of extracting the resources required for the production of the devices and microprocessors on which AI depends. In some regions of the world, children and adolescents work in dangerous conditions, crushing the materials from which rare earth elements are extracted. The bodies of these people are scarred, injured and worn down so that computational flow may continue uninterruptedly. Furthermore, criminal networks use online platforms, messaging systems, anonymous payment methods, and profiling techniques in order to recruit, control, and transport victims of trafficking, very often minors, reducing men and women to data to be tracked and packages to be moved around within the same digital circuits that support much of the global economy. Now, not only is that pretty hard-hitting, I don't know all his sources, but I imagine he wouldn't have written that without knowing very well that it was based on serious research. It is noteworthy that soon after this passage, Pope Leo takes the opportunity to apologize on behalf of the Church for those periods in the past when the Church has itself been involved in slavery. He says, "This constitutes a wound in Christian memory, one from which we cannot consider ourselves detached. It is impossible not to feel deep sorrow when contemplating the immense suffering and humiliation endured by so many, in stark contrast to their immeasurable dignity as persons infinitely loved by the Lord. For this, in the name of the Church, I sincerely ask for pardon." It was interesting that, rather than studying the richness of the whole of the encyclical, some media commentators again highlighted this apology as one of the most significant parts of the document. Just a few paragraphs later, there is a strong statement about medical research, which may come up later in our panel discussion. This paragraph is also under the general heading of Breaking the Chains of New Forms of Slavery. Even today, colonialism assumes new forms. It no longer dominates only bodies, but appropriates data, transforming personal lives into exploitable information. Entire regions, especially those marked by structural fragility and limited geopolitical relevance, are currently subjected to a new mindset of extraction, that of health data, epidemiological profiles, genetic maps, and demographic information. These have become the new rare earths of power. Vital data, which once aggregated and analysed, can be used to train predictive models, guide investment strategies, anticipate crises, and above all, determine who and what is deemed to matter. Those who control the health data of entire peoples, often collected under the pretext of aid, research or innovation, possess a structural leverage over the future, for they can shape needs and markets. They can also decide before others to whom medicines, investments and protections will be allocated. Again, very strong stuff. Another aspect of human activity, which Michael did touch on, there might be some overlap here, also becomes an area where the Pope expresses strong opinions. We must now turn our attention to the yet more tragic issue of war. Here the question is not merely the efficiency of new tools, but also the risk that technology, detached from ethics and responsibility, will render decisions about life and death more rapid and impersonal, and will present the use of force as an immediate and viable option. The Pope speaks of the ways in which war has changed its nature, when there are seen to be no limits and where mass civilian casualties and mass displacement of peoples are normalized. This has been going on throughout the 20th century, but today something even worse. Today, however, we are witnessing a real paradigm shift in public discourse and in decisions regarding rearmament, with a troubling revival of war as an instrument of international politics, while the very ethical principles that had previously limited its use are being eroded. Public opinion is gradually being shaped and conditioned by polarizing media narratives, which are often amplified by algorithms that prioritize conflict and confrontation. We're also witnessing a disconcerting loss of historical memory, as first-hand accounts of the Holocaust and the two world wars are disappearing. This leads to a selective or distorted rewriting of the past in a context where fake news and the manipulation of narratives obscure the lessons that have been learned. Without a living memory of the horrors of war, political decisions risk being made on the basis of power alone, without any consideration for the long-term consequences. Pope Leo uses strong and original language as he continues to address the horrors and impersonality of modern warfare, which are not just the invention of science fiction, particularly in so-called action films and games, but are happening here and now. Is this being done in our name? Sometimes there is talk of artificial moral agents, as if machines were able to distinguish between right and wrong with greater consistency than a human being. Yet moral judgment cannot be reduced to calculation, for it involves conscience, personal responsibility, and the recognition of the other as a person. Therefore, it is not permissible to entrust lethal or otherwise irreversible decisions to artificial systems. No algorithm can make war morally acceptable. When the decision to strike becomes automated or opaque, the risk of abdicating responsibility increases. For this reason, the chain of responsibility must be identifiable and verifiable. Those who design, train, authorize, and employ technology must be held accountable for their decisions. Any technology that facilitates attacks without seeing the face of human beings lowers the moral threshold of conflict. Target selection and the use of force must not confuse competence and non-competence, nor ignore the impact on defenseless populations. Leo shows that he is politically astute. Remember that the Holy See has an extraordinarily effective worldwide diplomatic presence, as Michael referred to in answer to one of the questions, which means that the Holy See as a whole is in a position to know what is going on in the capitals, but also in the remotest parts of our troubled world. Near the end of the section on war, he notes, when a culture normalizes and justifies conflict, a dangerous pathway opens up in what seems unthinkable today may become acceptable tomorrow in the name of utility or security. In countries marked by serious social tensions, we cannot rule out the possibility that some leaders may consider armed conflict as an effective way of diverting attention from domestic problems and a cynical tool for managing difficulties. In the last 10 pages of the encyclical, the Holy Father looks for causes for hope, with the title, Building the Civilization of Love. We view history in the light of the crucified and risen Lord, to whom the Father has given all authority in heaven and on earth. We do not consider the present as a predetermined fate, but an opportunity for personal and collective conversion. Moreover, we believe in the power of the kingdom, which grows from the tiny size of a mustard seed, which, once sown, sprouts and grows. Even in the darkest nights, the Lord raises up men and women who refuse to give up, who persevere in doing good, who protect the vulnerable and open pathways to reconciliation. The memory of the saints, righteous people, and the oft-forgotten peacemakers show us that grace does not magically eliminate conflict, but instead it inspires active resistance to evil and an astonishing creativity in doing good. Some commentators who mentioned, disarming AI and the apology for slavery were also rather bemused to note that the Pope quoted J.R.R. Tolkien from The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien wrote, I can't remember which character said this, probably someone here can tell me, "It is not our part to master all the tides of the world, but to do what is in us for the succour of those years wherein we are set, uprooting the evil in the fields that we know, so that those who live after may have clean earth to till." The Pope continues, so not Tolkien, "The civilization of love will not arise from a single or spectacular gesture, but from the sum total of small and steadfast acts of fidelity that serve as a bulwark against dehumanization." He realizes that war is not just about violence on the battlefield or in large cities. He writes, "Cyber attacks, data manipulation, and campaigns of influence orchestrated with the help of AI can destabilize entire countries even before open armed conflict erupts. Diplomacy must be capable of operating effectively in this new environment, negotiating shared regulations on the use of digital technologies, which came up in one of the questions, in order to protect civilians and the most vulnerable from invisible yet real forms of violence. As the Pope moved towards his conclusion, he proclaims a great vision of hope, based on the central belief that God loves the world and sent his Son that we might have life. He invites everyone to contemplate in the face of the Son of God the grandeur of humanity that shines a light also on the era of AI. In Christ we are called to cooperate in the work of creation, rather than be disinterested observers of technological processes that limit our freedom and responsibility. The dignity inscribed in each of us by the Holy Spirit can also be seen in our capacity to reflect critically, to choose and love freely, and to form authentic relationships. No computational system, however sophisticated, can create a heart that gives itself, or a conscience that discerns good from evil. And just two more quotations from the very last paragraphs of the encyclical. As we look at the future, I would like to recall the image of Nehemiah, whom we chose as our companion and guide at the outset. Nehemiah heard the cry of a devastated city, brought that pain to prayer, discerned before God, asked for help, received permission to return, organized the work, confronted internal and external resistance, and rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem with the assistance of the people, brick by brick. In this era of digital transformation, I see in him a striking parable of our own vocation, which is not to be passive spectators of social and cultural fractures, nor mere commentators on what is crumbling, but men and women prepared to enter the construction sites of history, research laboratories, technology companies, schools, the media, institutions and local communities in order to rebuild what has collapsed and protect what is threatened. Like Nehemiah, we too are called to unite listening and courage, prayer and responsibility, so that even when a technocratic mentality or partisan interests seem to prevail, the human city may become a more fitting place to live. And then the very last paragraph, which again brings in weaving, I'm glad to see. With the same faith as Mary, let us become weavers of hope in our world, sharing who we are and what we have, so that the presence of Jesus may grow among us and his kingdom take shape. In the humble fidelity of daily life, even the era of AI can become a time in which the Holy Spirit brings about the civilization of love in our lives. Indeed, the Lord continues to make all things new and offers every era the possibility of becoming part of salvation history in the light of the Incarnation. I entrust our desire to the Mother of Christ, to the woman of the Magnificat, that she may guide our steps through this time of change and preserve in each of us true faith in the gospel, so that we may bear witness to the grandeur of humanity in which God has made his dwelling. Thank you. I've got to answer the questions now, haven't I? Yes. Are there any questions or comments? You're all stunned by too many words. Not really. Yes. Can we have the microphone up here, please?
John Parsons. Oh, there you are. Thank you. In all this conversation, I mean, it's amazing the amount of detail and hard work that's gone into this presentation today, and we're very grateful for that. But one of the great possibilities of humanity is laughter and humour, and that has never been mentioned anywhere in any of these documents. And AI doesn't seem to have a sense of humour or laughter. Is that true?
That should have been in the dignity of the human person, shouldn't it? Yeah. Well, I thought the first slide was quite funny. But, fair enough, Dave. That's a good point. I'm sure we should all do with humour. I'll have to look through it again to see if I can find something. But possibly not, yes. Any questions?
So I want to ask the question, do you think Pope Leo and the advisors who've helped him, do they need to be controversial to actually move the technocrats and politicians?
Sorry, to move the...
To move the technocrats and politicians, do you have to be controversial? Or at least be pointed and stick a pin in them slightly?
I think he has got the moral status that he can make strong statements and he can say difficult things. And from what I've heard about I don't know very much about it, but about the inner workings of the Vatican Secretary of State, and things like the United Nations, they do have an influence. And it's interesting that, for instance, evidence that the AI companies are hiring philosophers, it'll be another step if they start hiring theologians as well, I suppose. But even to have philosophers in to try and sort out what they're trying to do is a good step, I think.
Well, I think that's very good, because I get the impression that our politicians basically assess people on are they on side or not, and if you're on side, it doesn't matter.
Absolutely, yes, yes. Okay, yes, Henry? Up here, Liv?
On a much lighter subject, echoing from what this gentleman has said about laughter. So, I play chess, and when chess beat Kasparov, it takes the fun away. And I thought, let's go. You need quantum computer to beat it. But then the pattern, the recognition, the self-learning, when the Korean Go player was beaten, that took the fun away from me on playing Go. I play music, so tomorrow I'm going to play music upstairs, but I make mistakes. But that's real AI, they don't make mistakes. There's no soul. There's no soul at all. No authenticity. So I'm still having hope that I make mistakes and we crave laughter as well.
It's interesting, I don't think either I or Michael actually used the word soul when talking about personhood, but I mean, we could have done, I suppose, couldn't we? But thank you for that, it's interesting.
Father, this is probably just a very simple...
Closer to the mic.
Oh, just a very simple I'm wondering why so many people are losing their jobs because of AI, and people are having to sell their houses because they don't have a job anymore. What effect is this having on...
It's obviously a very hot topic. I did read somewhere just a couple of days ago, saying that it's all very well for the AI companies to be producing all sorts of sophisticated programs, but one feature which might lead to a financial bubble bursting is that people will be working such reduced hours that whatever products are produced, no one will be able to afford to buy them. You know. But then I saw another prediction that AI will result in the loss of 87 million jobs and will create 95 million new jobs. But how do you know what to believe really in this sort of thing? But it's a real problem, certainly. And for the people, that is the trouble, which has been mentioned, the fact that whatever legislation we have, an awful lot of the dynamic behind the AI companies is not countries and states. It's companies and, in fact, indeed individuals. So the ability to regulate and to take political action to somehow lessen the effect of unemployment is a real problem, because why should the owners of these huge conglomerations care? Whereas, hopefully in some countries at least, politicians of some kinds do care about things like jobs. It's a real problem. Question down there? Sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to counter that a little bit on an article I picked up. And while we keep hearing about jobs being lost, IKEA put AI into their call centres. Quite a significant international business, retrained 8,500 staff to become interior designers working in their outlets and increased their business by $1.5 billion. So I think there's an argument here, because we keep seeing in the press it's about losing jobs. There is an argument about how it can replace and how it can do things differently, but it comes down to, I think, the ethics of the companies and how they actually deploy their AI.
No. The question up here, Liv. Liv, up here. Thanks. Yeah. It's on. Yeah. Put it right to your mouth. If you hold it to your mouth.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
I've been very impressed with the presentation, and obviously everything that Pope Leo says is brilliant and helpful. And the one thing that consoles me, excuse me and my voice, is that yesterday or the day before, I typed into Google, what is the female equivalent of cock of the roost?
What's that?
And it completely stumped Google.
Sorry, it stumped me as well. Sorry, was it?
You don't know what a cock of the roost is?
No.
No. Somebody who thinks he's in charge, basically.
Oh, right.
And so I waited for this thing. It couldn't do it.
Oh.
It could talk about cock. Sorry. It could talk about cock in all sorts of ways. But it just didn't understand the imaginative
Yeah. The idea
thinking
of
behind that.
metaphors are probably a bit difficult.
Sorry?
Metaphors are probably a bit difficult for AI.
Well, exactly, which is part
English
of...
teachers agree? Hello?
That's human creativity that it doesn't understand.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
that gives
thank
me
you.
hope.
Any others? It is getting quite hot, isn't it? We need a break. Okay, so we'll break slightly earlier. At 1:45, I hope you'll all be able to stay, get some more water from the room behind the church, and then we'll get rid of the screen, and we'll have 6 or 7 people up here as a panel to answer more questions and to develop any other of the ideas we've had. Okay? Thank you very much. Yeah.
Fascinating subject, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just.
Have you read it?
The what?
Have you read it? The document. Have you seen it?
The particular, I just kind of briefly when Maureen was last week, I started looking at it and started to go down to Oxford to see friends. So we started listening to it in the car, and it was such a busy week, so I didn't. So I was quite comfortable coming here today, but it's just to give my experience in construction is and it does impact.
But it's you're using it every day, something. But do you know you're using it?
You do because well, you know other people are using it. You know other people are using it because all of a sudden you get these very eloquent emails of people who could barely. You know, I was thinking, I don't know, it took me a while to realise that.
Oh, thank you.
This is an incoming attack. One guy wouldn't press the button, and as a result, he was sacked from the Russian military in disgrace, stole his pension off him. He lives in broken poverty in a scrubby little flat, and the only consolation he's got is a trophy award from saying thank you for saving me. And that was just pre.
So 86. He just said this doesn't matter. That makes sense. How many is that? Really? 6, is it?
Are you on the panel?
I think I'm going to be filled in. Two emails are going to come in. Huh? Oh, right. I'll just sit down in your... So, Zashan, how was all that? Interesting?
Yeah, it was, both your speech and my speech is really fascinating. I don't know about statistical research, but I've definitely learned a lot from what you said and how it's, I guess how much it would have changed each year, how relevant this one was at least, yeah. So what, does he write every year? Does it every certain year?
This is the first one. He came on in March or April last year.
Yeah.
We were waiting for this for what was. And people guess that it would be on air same time. So, Pope Francis before him on he probably wrote about 5 or something. So it's a big deal.
What did he write?
Most important is for that artist. Really strong.
Yeah. Everyone's talking about AI. And it's so much linked to humanity and like human alignment and balance.
I'm glad it's quite long. I confess. I haven't tried to be well, not Harvard, it's just, I don't expect them to say. I'm not really listening. But my teacher is.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right.
Is parking free over there today or not?
Today? Oh, no, sorry. Sorry about that. But Grace, we can when Ashley is back. If you get anything, Ashley can sort it out. Right. Let's see if anyone's emailed in a question or complaint. Sorry? We can tell. Let's think.
fine.
One person is watching. Well, at the moment, maybe they've gone through.
Well, that's worth laughing about.
Huh? No, one person is watching.
Can I give you this? It's from somebody who wanted to donate expenses.
Okay, thanks very
And
much.
I said if you didn't want any
One
expenses,
person is watching.
go to Capital.
We have at the moment, maybe they've gone through.
Well, that's worth laughing about.
Huh? Well, two watching now.
Well, can you put in anything else?
No, one person is watching. You can record it. It's just recorded, please.
Will it be published in to donate expenses?
Okay, thanks very much.
I said if you want
One person is watching. It's recorded. We have at the moment, maybe they've gone through.
well, it's worth laughing about.
No, well, two watching. I can send out the slides. But I never did. You're right. As I said that, I have done in the past. So. I mean, I could say it as well. I can yes, send out the slides. But I never did. You're right. As I said that, I have done in the past. So. It's okay. I mean, I could say it as well. I can yes, send out the slides. I never did. You're right. As I said that, I have done in the past. So. It's okay. I mean, I could say it as well. I can yes, send out the slides. I never did. You're right. As I said that, I have done in the past. So. It's okay. I mean, I could say it as well. I can yes, send out the slides. I never did. You're right. As I said that, I have done it once.
Yeah.
My name is Mike Hughes.
Hi, Mike.
I'm a local radiologist, so
Hi,
my
yeah.
wife volunteered me,
Which is wonderful.
which is something that, so I use a bit of AI
Brilliant.
in radiology, so I can talk about that and
Yeah.
perhaps some of the implications of it. But I don't tend to be as clever as the first two.
He was very concise, very clear. For a philosopher, he was really brilliant. Yeah.
My name is Mike Hughes.
Hi, Mike.
I'm a local radiologist, so my wife volunteered me.
Which is clear. Oh, yeah, I've been told just to take questions from
We're going to go down the list and just introduce ourselves to some of the implications. Because there's a teacher from Kent.
He was very concise, very clear. For a philosopher, he was really brilliant. Yeah.
My name is Mike Hughes. I'm a local radiologist, so my wife volunteered to come to you may have some information we don't know.
I might receive briefing sessions, and then when if no questions comes, I might say to you, can you tell us about that? For a philosopher, he was really yeah.
They're very interested. It's really enjoyable. Thank you.
I might receive briefing sessions, and then when if no questions comes, I might say to you, can you tell us about that? For a philosopher, he was really yeah.
They're very interested. It's really enjoyable. Thank you.
I might receive briefing sessions, and then when if no questions comes, I might say to you, can you tell us about that? For a philosopher, he was really yeah. I might receive briefing sessions, and then when if no questions comes, I might say to you, for a philosopher, he was really yeah.
got your chair. So put one beside you. You've got your chair. So put one beside you.
Thank you very much for your lecture.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, wonderful.
Really enjoyed the lecture.
Oh, thank you.
Fantastic.
Parish audiences are tricky beast. You never know the diversity of background.
Yeah, particularly you've got company that want to learn and engage.
Thank you very much for your lecture.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, wonderful.
School talk. People are there because there's the past.
Yeah.
Did you still lecture at Oxford?
I did tutorial.
We've got a friend, Imogen Chow, she's just medieval Spanish. Exeter College. Thank you very much. It's a huge college.
Huge university. People are there because there's the past.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure the structure. Did you still lecture at Oxford?
Is your background business?
Yeah, it's business. I'm so we've got our own business. We've got medieval Spanish. Project it's a huge college. Huge university. Big regions, hospitals, skyscrapers. So it's interesting how AI is. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's business. We've got our own business. It's a huge college.
That's on.
So we've come back from the break, which is wonderful. Hope everyone feels refreshed
That's
from
on.
that. Are you happy with that? So we continue to explore how AI can both challenges and enriches our understanding of human dignity. So we've come back from the break, which is wonderful. Hope everyone feels refreshed
That's
from
on.
that. It's the feedback from there. You always hate hearing your own voice. So we continue to explore how AI... Well, I think as Christians, the big question for us is how AI will help us be better people, to live closer to the gospel values. So that's the most important. We thank Father Oliver again for arranging this conference and for all the work he's put in. And, of course, to Michael, what a wonderful presentation. How clear and concise. Everyone in the break that I spoke to was saying we're very appreciative of that. Thank you. Now we have our panel. And if I just briefly say something about everybody. Michael, you know, Michael Wee, who did our presentation, so I'll skip you, Michael, that's right. So we have Dr. Michael Hughes, who's a consultant radiologist. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for coming.
He is actually a parishioner here, and he's at the moment he's kind of a consultant radiologist using online. So he's not actually working in the hospital. He's so high up that everybody else in the country just consults him. I think that's what it is. He can talk a little bit about that. We have Kieran, who's a project coordinator for HS2, and he's representing kind of the business end of the world. Hopefully have something to say about that. And then we have 3 educationalists with us. We have Melise, who's actually the digital lead at KES and has brought with her 2 students. We have Darshan, who is a Year 12 student, and he hopes to go on to do a degree in AI, and he is the president of the AI Society at KES. And we have Nathaniel, who's a Year 10 student and has been chosen because he's particularly good at philosophy and ethics of philosophy that they study in Year 10, and he also has a keen interest in IT. Welcome. So the idea is that everybody can ask a question, and we would ask you to keep your question very precise and to direct it at a particular member of the panel if it is that focus, so I'll focus it for you. So inviting questions from the floor, there is a mic. Have we got? Oh, there we go, we have a mic for anyone. If you just raise your hand and the mic will come to you.
I'm not too sure which member of the panel wants to answer this, but I'm really struggling with AI. What is truth and what is fake? I use the internet for getting my source for news, but verifying the content is a real issue for me. And it's also on some of the things on YouTube, on the Christian channels. There's so much out there, which half of it seems bogus. So I'm asking, how do you discern? This is a real problem for people like myself.
Okay, so the question is about truth, discerning truth and fake information. Obviously, there's lots of information on the internet, and some of it is bogus. How do we discern from truth? And we're probably asking in different fields, really, how that could be so. So maybe we could start with our resident consultant here.
I think it's a very good question. I think it's a very difficult thing to answer because, as you say, we are surrounded by so much data, so much information that we get saturated by it. And that used to be a computer term, data saturation syndrome. But because computers are faster, quicker, we're approaching quantum computers. I think that's a thing of the past. From my viewpoint, one of the areas of fake news which broke my heart was during COVID, where there was so much anti-vaccination, misinformation, inaccuracies, conspiracy theories. We seem to be living in a world where science doesn't count for anything. We never went to the moon. We don't know anything about space. Evolution. Everything is wrong. I don't think I know the answer to that. I think you have to be discerning to the websites you go to. I too get a lot of news from websites. The BBC and the Telegraph is usually where I go to mostly. I don't go to anything that Mr. Trump has dealings with and his cronies, Fox News, etc. I think you have to be discerning. I think you have to use your own intelligence because, as I mentioned earlier, AI will give you facts or information, and humans have to apply wisdom. And I think if it doesn't look right, it doesn't make sense, it probably needs to be challenged. I don't have any answers, I'm afraid.
Thank you. I think in the spirit of St. Benedict, we'll go to the young next. So Darshan, how you've grown up with computers. How do you discern what's false and what's true?
Yeah, so when you search on your AI platform or your large language model, the AI will never want to say, I don't know the answer to that. Whatever question you ask, it will always try to be helpful, or at least it thinks it's trying to be helpful. So it will just make up a random answer. So when I was studying for my exams last year, I was trying to find quotations from a book that I was studying, and some of the quotations that I would come up with seemed really random. And I'd read the book, so obviously I knew that those quotations didn't exist. And I fact-checked it, so I had my digital copy of the book and searched for those quotations, and they just wouldn't exist in any variation that I searched up. So I think, while we have the knowledge ourselves, we have to fact-check what is right and what is wrong. But I think slowly, if people keep blindly reading, what is the AI saying, we're going to sort of be misled quite rapidly. So I think it's our responsibility now to make sure that we truly understand the topic that we're trying to ask the AI before it keeps giving us random facts that we soon won't truly understand.
Thank you. Would Digital Lead like to add something?
So this is obviously an enormous problem in schools, and I'm struck by you said, let's ask the young. Now, something that I've talked to our students about, so we have PSHE sessions and personal development sessions on AI, for example, and I found this great stat that says that the more time you spend online, the worse you are at working out what is fake and what's not. And the more confident you are at thinking you can discern what is fake and what's not, the worse you are. So it's really difficult, and the issue is if you tell people to be critical and question everything, then what this actually leads to is cynicism, and then you think everything's fake, and then that's a very disturbing position to be in. So I think you've got to be curious about what you're doing, and you've got to, you've mentioned here about going to the correct sources of information. It's never been more important to think about, not to distinguish what's fake and what's not, but to take a few steps back and to think about what information am I looking at and where. So the government, for example, has published this year some new guidance on PSHE and what schools should teach. It doesn't tell you how to teach it, of course, because obviously that's going to change every single year. And you'll see in newspapers, lots of people say, teach students to distinguish what's fake. Tell them what the tells are of a fake Instagram profile or a fake video. There will be tells, for example, in the video of the young man being thrown off into a canyon. But that doesn't help because you're not teaching the principles, which ultimately have to be to remain curious and to be critical in an uncynical way, so that then you're able to educate yourself. Darshan I'm his English teacher, so thank God he did have the knowledge to know that those quotations were fake. But there's a baseline of knowledge you have to have before you can have the critical thinking skills to understand what's fake and what isn't. And that's very hard, obviously, to teach students, and that's our job as educators.
Yeah. Nathan, do you think you've been taught critical skills and to be curious about everything you learn from AI?
Yeah, definitely. I think misinformation's been a huge problem, like even before AI, and AI has probably just made it even worse. But if any of you have used Google recently, you'll probably see that it gives you an AI overview. I think it's quite dangerous to trust those AI overviews, because the AI overview might pull some from BBC and some from Reddit, and it will weigh BBC and Reddit basically as equal, and it will blindly tell you that both of them are true. Whereas if you actually go onto Reddit, you will actually be able to see that maybe it isn't true. Yeah.
So to be curious, as you say, you avoid a certain media.
I'm just wondering, how much time does it save us when you Google something because you want to get some information, then the information comes in, and then you think, right, I must now check this everywhere else to see if it's right or not. So we end up getting just even more confused. I think there is a website for that. It's called confused.com.
Yeah. The main thing we're saying to Chris's response is be curious, be critical, keep alive with your critical thinking skills.
Could I just follow up with the teacher and the pupils? How do they see the pupils and their peer group with AI and fake news? Do you see a lot of just taking everything at face value, or is there this discerning and interrogation of data? Because I'm really scared for the youngsters coming through today that not at KES, don't have the level of education, and are just accepting things as it's presented to them. So maybe
So do you find that pupils are learning the skills that the school is trying to embed?
So I think it very much depends on the student, and what you're saying is it's a sense of naivety. It's sort of student who in the past we've called gullible, and now obviously they've been made very vulnerable, because often you've got... I'm personally in favour of the social media ban because I see the effects that it has on students who are seeing content which is not aimed at them. They didn't look for it, and of course they're seeing it, and they can be really almost scarred by it, actually. But in terms of then the fake information, they're seeing it often at the wrong stage. So whatever critical skills you're giving them, they might be seeing something that's sort of a little bit beyond what they're capable of comprehending at that particular age. And some students are fine, and we have some very capable, bright young men at our school, but equally have some students who aren't online as much and don't appreciate all the things that they're seeing, and then they might just believe it. So I think it's really difficult, and this is where I think the social media ban will be a good thing, because it means then that students are seeing things at an appropriate age, and then they have the skills and the tools and the support and understanding where to get support, that you should fact check this, that this is wrong, and you should tell someone and talk to someone. And that's really, really important.
It kind of relates to what Michael was saying earlier about the sins that cry out for vengeance, because the oppression of the poor are those who are poor in skill but can't use the internet in an appropriate way. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
I could, yes. I think when I heard the first question, I immediately thought, the one useful thing Pilate said in the Gospel is, what is truth? and what was Jesus' response? Silence. And actually it's a very good response for today's AI age, because we don't get enough silence. We need to actually proactively cultivate spaces of silence, because how does AI, get promote its so-called views, its positions on things? It aggregates data, aggregates arguments. It doesn't have the ability, as we do, to take a step back, not to add things in a mathematical way and figure out the right thing to believe or do, but to take a step back and look at all of it and say, how does it affect my life? What am I willing to believe? What am I willing to risk in order to take the next step? So we have to find the times, we have to go out of our way to create moments of silence, to just sit back and think, what have I read today? What do I actually believe? What do I think I believe in theory, but when push comes to shove, I actually wouldn't believe? Those are things that we have to learn for ourselves and in community. That's what I would say.
Thank you. That's very fruitfully explored, that question. Can we take another question from the floor?
What are your guys' opinions on the phone ban and the social media ban? I know you talked about it a bit, but how do you think it's going to work? Because I think it's a good thing, especially social media ban, because there's a lot of really harmful stuff on social media, but I think people will definitely find a way to get through it and still be able to use social media. So, because I have touched on it a bit in school, but I just don't really understand how it's going to work.
Is this the ban, the proposed ban?
And the phone ban and the social media ban.
And would you be against it yourself, or would you? You're not quite sure yet.
I think the social media ban is good, but the phone ban, I think, because a lot of people take buses, and sometimes my mum texts me in school, and if it's important, then I'm going to respond.
Okay. So Jules is exploring the idea of social media ban and phone bans, particularly in school and for young people. Do you want to maybe should we start with your view?
I'll just do an explanation for people, first of all. So the government is working essentially with tech companies to create a social media ban, which means that there will need to be age verification, so that what they wanted it to be on the device, so the young person has to put in what age they are, so the aim is that they can't get around social media bans. With Australia, for example, they've done this, but young people are using VPNs, which is basically a way of getting around it and pretending that you're in a different country so you can still access social media. Our government wants to go a stage further, which I think is a good thing. So then there are fewer methods by which a student can access social media. I don't know, I can't give you all the technical information on that. The reality is that with computers, if someone is skilled enough and determined enough, they will find a way. I think the biggest worry, there's a statistic, something like 40% of people, the first time they actually see a pornographic image, they didn't come across it because they searched for it, they came across it because it was shown to them when looking for something else. And that's, I think, a really horrifying stat. And particularly for 11-year-olds, the number of 11-year-olds who've come across something pornographic is almost always because they didn't intend to. And if you think about that as the effect on a young person's mind and the view of themselves and sexuality, those sorts of things, that's really damaging. So I think that's the big advantage of social media bans. And also it's not putting them in the same concern of looking up things to do with self-harm, eating disorders, suicidal kind of imagery and discussions that they are having online without support networks, not knowing if that information is true or fake. So I think getting rid of all that is a very, very good thing. The phone ban is something quite different. So the government has added to statutory guidance, so i.e. schools have to do it, that basically phones cannot be used at any point during the school day. So at the moment, the vast majority of schools will have some sort of phone rule in place with some level of sanction if a phone is used in the wrong way. But at the moment, until September, schools are basically allowed to, students can use a phone if a teacher says look up a word rather than getting a dictionary out. Some schools might be allowing students to use a phone over the course of the school day. You can have it, you just can't use it in lesson or without teacher's permission. That's being strengthened. So how schools are interpreting it is slightly different. So some schools will be counting a smartphone as a banned item. So you cannot bring one onto site. Some schools will go down the pouch route. So you might have heard of Hoda pouches, where basically you put the phone in a pouch and it locks it. And this then means that the student has it in their bag, but they can't open the pouch. The problem with that is the pouches are very easy to open. You search it up and there's a video and you can use some magnets and it opens up in about 2 minutes and the pouches cost 20 quid per student. You've just dropped a couple of £1,000 on an essentially useless pouch. Then you've got the phone locker option, which you can go down as well. So everyone has to put their phone in a locker, maybe in tutor time each morning. So now we've got every classroom has a bank of lockers with phones in, but you could have more than one phone. There's all sorts of ways around that if you are determined enough and willing to risk a punishment. So schools will decide that for themselves. Bus passes, you print the QR. We've been looking at this at our school. Bus passes, you print a QR code. We will allow dumb phones for our Year 7 students who are coming in, so they still have a phone, but it's a dumb phone. We offer those in our school shop. It's a little Nokia that costs about 20 quid. We're wondering, will we maybe have Snake Society in school? I don't know. But different schools will do that in their own way. But again, there's evidence that says that even the presence of a phone on a desk, just seeing it, takes a student off task. So just having it there, just knowing it's there. Obviously, no one can control what a student does when they go to a bathroom, and they could be messaging, they could be arranging toilet trips with other students. You've got those risks. So I think anything that lets children be children a bit longer, lets them, one thing I love about our school is they call it Kesball, we've got little foam footballs, and I love seeing the fact that you've got, boys Nathaniel's age 15, who are playing football still, who are inventing their own little games and running around playing hide and seek. That's great because we don't allow phones at lunchtime. And if we did, I can guarantee they would all be just little droids on their phone.
Thank you.
I'm hoping that the library will have more borrowing. That's another thing that I really like, that you can go to lots of places and there's some of our youngest students just sitting reading as a trip hazard. I love that. Great trip hazard. Students sitting reading a book. I hope there's more things like that. So that's quite a long answer, but it's because it's quite a big
maybe
question.
Darshan and Nathaniel could add a little bit more if they... Go on, Darshan.
Yeah, I think a phone ban, phones can be really, really disruptive to education. I think especially in other schools, I've heard stories about a lot of students on their phones, and probably doesn't really help with their learning at all. I think I would probably support a phone ban in a lot of schools. But then with a social media ban, I'm not too sure about it. I think in principle, I'd really support it because social media, I think, is probably a net negative for our generation. But I don't understand how it could be enforced, how you can reduce things like VPNs, where you can pretend to be in another country. I think people always find a way to get around it, and there's a danger of that turning into a culture around young people, where they just all get around the rules rather than following them. You also
become
risk
expert deceivers.
Yeah, and you also risk pushing young people onto other platforms that aren't regulated. So, for example, only I think it's 5 or 6 big social media companies will have the under 16 ban. And I think you risk letting them go onto other sites that are less regulated and could be more harmful as well.
Would you agree, Daphne? And maybe, Michael, you might have a point of view from a parent of an 8-year-old. And
Yes, I think when you're under 16, the need for a phone is not... You don't need a smartphone, essentially, to complete your everyday tasks. Obviously, now schools, for example, have moved everything onto a smartphone to make things more easier, but it doesn't need to be the case. For example, like the bus passes. Bus companies still give bus passes out. It's not you need to have an online version, and if so, you just print it out. So there's always another option away from the phone or away from the device that is always available for especially students. And like Nathaniel said around the social media point, it's only a handful of companies, the big companies, that are actually going to have to follow the rules and implement the ban. And these are probably the more safer companies where there's more online safety regulations in place. And so if these companies are banned for under 16s, students will simply just bypass the system and find ways to work around it and potentially move to other less safe online sites which don't have the same regulations and in fact may put young children, or not young, but children in that age category at a higher security risk potentially.
yeah, thank you. Michael.
Yeah, what I'd add is I recently came across this term, I think it's smartphone sober or digitally sober. And the analogy is quite apt, because if we think of other things that are generally banned for under 16s or under 18s, yes, alcohol is banned in theory, but how many of us have had our first sip of something at the dinner table with mum and dad? So as parents, for those of us who are parents or carers, aunts and uncles, grandparents, it's our duty to model good behavior. It's no point asking others, what should I do to get my child off their smartphone if you yourself are also on your smartphone all the time, and I'm guilty of this as well. So whatever the situation, whatever the status of the ban, however people are getting around it, it's important that parents at home and other carers set a good example in how they stay sober digitally and also how they curate perhaps content for their children to see. So we avoid the twin extremes of addiction from a young age, but also thinking that this is some kind of forbidden fruit. And once I'm 16, it's TikTok all the way.
Thank you. Wonderful. Another question from the floor, perhaps. Katya.
Very much along these ideas of banning social media, using AI, kids may be also struggling, even people, everybody, even adults, myself, maybe. AI behaves like an artificial person, like a real person, actually. So do they have schools any awareness or plan or agenda or guideline for children that when you talk to ChatGPT or AI, listen, it's not a real person even if it behaves like a real person? Because I've seen actually 9, 10 years old kids, I happened to meet some who communicated with AI and they actually were very polite with the AI, like they talked to an authority, an adult person. It was quite scary. It was in my family. I witnessed it. So I really am concerned, my first question is about human and AI, machine difference. Also, in the AI world, how can we teach children, or do you have any plan to help kids to be aware?
So the concern is around AI being presented as though it's a human and with reason and soul, and how it's another kind of deception. I think you're worrying about. Yeah.
So I think this comes down to what schools teach in programs like we have a personal development program and a PSHE program, and it comes down to that, I think. And we have a digital sort of stream which runs through that program for each year, and that's part of what the government has specifically updated for this year, saying that schools must teach about AI and chatbots, and I think it even specifically mentions this illusion of intimacy and this sense of young people not understanding essentially that this chatbot isn't human. Obviously, that's something that we then will carry out as part of our PSHE lessons. But I think actually that speaks to something else as well, which is people not knowing how to get the right support and feeling like they don't have someone to talk to. I think the vast majority of people, an AI, chatbot, or indeed the internet is not their first resort when they're really concerned about something. It's often for a place of loneliness and desperation. So having within a school lots of people that you can talk to, and then making sure that young people see that they have people that they can speak to. Everyone just needs one person really that they can speak to. I think that's the big thing. And then it comes back to what we're saying about remaining curious and critical, because obviously then you've got when someone is in a really vulnerable position, often they're things they aren't able to do in an objective kind of way. So I think it's part of what schools teach in PSHE. I think also, I'm not a parent, but I think also these are sorts of conversations for parents to have about if you're really worried, who would you talk to? The internet's not going to give you what you want. Darshan had said about how it always wants to be helpful, and sometimes it can confirm thoughts that actually a parent or a teacher or someone in a religious community would say, no, don't think about yourself like that. That's not the right way to do it. No, that person was just wrong or mean or stupid when they said that to you. And that's what people need, and that's what AI can never give. You see things about AI therapy and things like that, which I think can be pretty harmful. This is where you need a human to be robust because they know you, and that's different. It comes out of being known and being seen. Yeah.
Keeping it people-sized. I know that when I ask AI a question and it can't say, oh, that's a fantastic question, it's really cheesy, kind of noisy. I wonder, Michael, I know you deal a lot with AI and kind of the people interaction as a medic. I wonder, could you talk about how AI is used in medicine? Well, maybe then after in business it might help.
I've used AI a few years ago. I was approached by a friend who had a small startup company that wanted to develop an algorithm to help analyze chest x-rays. Chest x-rays is one of the commonest single radiographic examinations used in a wide variety of clinical indications. A lot of the time you pick up abnormalities that need to be investigated further. A large proportion of them are normal. And it's a huge demand on radiologists as a profession across the board. And we live in a country where, if you look at the league table of the rankings of number of radiologists per population, we are way down the list. I think Romania has a higher radiologist per head of population than the UK. And so we started developing this. So I would sit at my computer system at home, and I would have a series of chest x-rays which were abnormal. Some of them were normal, and I would have to look at them, use my experience, and use an electronic sort of iPad pen and draw on them the abnormalities and then label it as to what I thought the pathology was. And I've been doing it. Became a doctor in 1980, and I've been a radiologist as a consultant level since 1992. So I've seen a few chest x-rays in my time. And I was quite excited by this because whilst it doesn't replace a radiologist, you still have to look at it and put it into clinical context and then generate a report that your clinical colleague or GP colleague will say, that's really helpful. Thank you, Mike. But what it does is it sorts out a huge amount of normal examinations. And when you report in large numbers, it's very difficult to keep your discrimination and your discretion up at a high level. And an AI algorithm will never forget. So when I label 100 X-rays with different types of consolidation, infection in the lung, it will look at those. It goes into the deep learning algorithm. I don't understand what that means. And then it feeds back, and then it produces a heat map, a map of these are the highlighted areas, and then it will flag up the potential causes. But the radiologist looks at it and says, that's an area that's remained abnormal for 3 months. That's not infection. This is a type of cancer. So I was very excited by that. It worked very well. But a bit like a lot of small startups, because there are big global players into this, it didn't go too far. We got a good product. It won international awards. Something called the Prix Gallienne, which is, in healthcare technology terms, is regarded as something that's almost like the Nobel Prize. It's a very prestigious prize for companies. Didn't actually help in the business world. Big business overtook it and took it on.
I was interested particularly how then that system, it still results in a human interaction. When you make your decisions,
yes,
it still has to go. Could you go?
Well, I've had some other dealings with a product that was designed to look for intracranial hemorrhage. So patients present with headaches, head injuries, suspected strokes, and the algorithm will look at the whole of the CT scan, and then it puts an electronic flag on what it suspects to be a hemorrhage. And it can be very helpful. It can be very subtle. And if you miss it, it can be potentially catastrophic for the patients. When it first came online, and this is going back about 6 years ago, it was absolutely awful. It comes up, so you open up the screen, there's the brain scan, and then in big text, in bright colors, it says, this is not to be used for diagnostic purposes. It is as a guide only to be used under the authority of an appropriate medically trained individual.
And when you use that now, I was just interested in earlier, you were telling me that when you use that now, they come to you, you then, when you've kind of come to an emergency one, you will then ring the person.
Yes, I mean, my name goes on the bottom of the report. So if I see an abnormality on a scan, I have a system where a few clicks of my mouse, and it flags up the examination as critically urgent. That goes straight back to the radiology computer system, and it gets flagged up in the local hospital. And another couple of clicks of a mouse, and I get a call back, and I can speak to the consultant or the doctor that's requested the scan to flag up, this is an urgent scan, this needs urgent clinical attention. So it doesn't detract from the fact that a radiologist or a doctor or a human has to put it in context and has to intervene appropriately. And sometimes you have to override it, because occasionally it's wrong. Yeah. When it first started, it was, in my opinion, very inaccurate. Yeah. But now they are getting better and better and more subtle, and they are helpful. A lot of radiologists thought, oh, goodness me, this is a terrible specialty to be in because it's all computerized. We're all going to be out of jobs. Exactly the opposite. We have a shortage of radiologists. The number of complex investigations go up and up and up. I used to report chest x-rays as the first measure of lung cancer or early follow-up. It soon became replaced by CT scans, where you have a couple of hundred images. Now it's a couple of thousand images. If I'm reporting a trauma scan, a major trauma, car crash or major injury, I can have 10,000 images to look at. I can do it, and I do it, but they do flag up, this is an urgent intracranial bleed, these are multiple rib fractures, there is hemorrhage in the liver. These things,
so you're using it in a very, very positive way.
But, as I say, I still have to put a lot of work in. Okay. Or at least I find it hard work sometimes.
I don't know if you want to edit anything, Kieran, at all, to how the interface between humans and AI.
Well, it's very fascinating. My background, I'm a carpenter by trade, but now I end up running these big multi-million-pound projects, superstructures around the world. I have been historically in Canada, Norway, and now in the UK. And the latest project I've just built, it's a 1.5 kilometre long bridge right into the Curzon approach into Birmingham.
Kieran, could put in just a little bit.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So the latest project I've worked on is a 1.5 kilometre long bridge from Dudderston Junction into Curzon, where the main station is going to be. I think sometimes I look at AI and I wonder, in 100 years' time, somebody's going to take a picture of Kieran Kelly and go, 100 years ago, this was a carpenter. He used his hands. Because it's almost like the hand, it's like the Benedictine way of labour in the land on a daily basis. It's almost like the whole conversation today has been around that in order to win, we must make somebody lose, and that's a bad way of looking at it. But the one thing I can tell you in business, and especially around the engineers, they're not that intelligent anymore. I think me and Henry have had this conversation before. As a carpenter, you're constantly crunching numbers. You have to work it out. I had a senior engineer on a project we were building in Birmingham, quite a significant project, and he said it was 3 degrees over 2 metres, and I went 60 mil. And he was shocked that I could work that out. And he spent all day on CAD trying to prove me wrong. And I started doubting myself. And it's so it's. I think that there will be a like.
So you're warning against too heavy reliance on.
Well, massively so. I think we're almost too fearful of it, because Kato and myself were in. One of the reasons a lot of we've set up our own business, because we almost wanted to be free of this new technology that actually kind of lacked the human. We asked it to. AI is very intelligent and equally very stupid, and we shouldn't be that fearful of it. And ultimately, we asked it to transform a document and it was 14 pages, and at the end of it was ridiculous. It failed hopelessly. And so I think the only way it will go, if you get these large language models and you pump all the information, the only one conclusion I think it can come to be is to be Christ-like.
I wonder, could I take that up about the kind of the information that is being poured in? Something with Michael about the oppression of the poor, because AI is a huge expense, both for the environment, but the gig workers. There are apparently 5 million gig workers in the world who are paid pittance, and they're working essentially as slave labour. And their work is to put information into the AI system. So they're literally taking information from books of various sources and pumping it into the system. And sometimes they're exposed to terrible digital images that affect their mental health. And if they can't work that day, they're supervised by AI anyway, which is non-human, and therefore they can't work. Well, that's it. You're not a worker anymore. You've lost your job, so to speak. If they're sick that day, they don't have any human element to the way they're being managed. So it's relying on millions of people putting this information into the big the big systems of data, and it is one of the terrible things, the oppressor of the poor. And just as a kind of really philosophical question, Michael, is it worth it? The means to the ends. Can we justify it? There's lots of positives about AI, but how?
Yeah, I think in a way you've said it as well as I could have, that these are not new problems at the end of the day, but their scale and the ferocity of the challenge is magnified by AI. And there's no, in a way, it would be premature to make a decision now about whether it's worth it, because as we've heard, on the one hand, in medicine, it can work wonders. It can do so much good, even for certain jobs as well. But it also does a lot of harm, and it also leaves its own trail of destruction in its wake. So this is just it's the age-old question of sometimes we have to wait and see and learn through experience, but also how can we minimize all of that damage or eradicate it along the way? Because I think there is a narrative of hope in AI, that we shouldn't be quick to say, it does so much bad, so much harm, let's just go back to a pre-AI world. I think that would also be naive in a different sort of way. But we have to be aware of all the unintended consequences. We know that just for AI to generate one image for you, something like 1 liter of water that's being used, not an exact figure, but thereabouts. The amount of computing power, of energy, is something I think people didn't foresee, and which we, for the most part, are shielded from. It's the same story with Bitcoin, which is very, very energy intensive. And Bitcoin is also an interesting cautionary tale, because it was meant to be this kind of democratic form of money, which no government would control, which would help the ordinary people. Instead, it's being used by terrorists, by money launderers. So this is an age-old story.
Could I just add something on, because you expressed...
Very briefly, because we're on time.
You expressed major concerns about the welfare of people that are inputting the information into AI systems from books, etc. I became aware of something called scrape bots. I don't know if any of you have heard of this term, but essentially, I'm a member of a radiology society, Radiopedia. It's for non-profit, and any radiologist can upload images of interesting cases, educational cases from all around the world, and it's free to all radiologists in some form. If you come from a well-to-do country like us, I pay a subscription.
I'm going to press you on the time that you go.
Essentially, it's a way that AI systems are now stealing at vast data. They data mine legitimate companies or legitimate websites that will steal information, and then they will be using it in a corporate or commercial way, and it will bypass the people that are already being oppressed.
I can see Nathaniel nodding and that, and they're aware of all this. Obviously, young people are just so much more versed and immersed in this digital world than we are, so that's fun. I think I just conclude by thanking Father Oliver for organising the whole seminar, and of course to our panellists. Each one of them have contributed. I think particularly the young people have contributed wonderfully and enriched our thoughts today. So thank you.
I think, as we're in church, I should say something holy, don't you think? So I'll just say, if we just pray together the Our Father to finish off. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. And may Almighty God bless us all, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you very much for coming. It was very encouraging. And thank you.